Thanks, Anurag, for all those kind words. Anurag and I go back a long way. He was a student in our first batch at MDI. Of course, I joined as a professor about 7 years after, so he's actually 7 years senior to me. Just to add one thing to what Anurag said, I agree 100%. It's supposed to be a funding winter, but for the right startup, for the right business, funding is not an issue. I've been an angel investor. I've interacted with VCs. Funding is not an issue. Fortunately, what has happened is 20 years back, we were focusing on eyeballs. Then we started focusing on revenues at any cost. To hell with profitability. Now, fortunately, we are moving towards what is called path to profitability. And therefore, if you have that, funding is not an issue, right? So I agree with Anurag. Okay, so just to give you a little background, I've been an angel investor for about, I think, 12 years now with lead angels. And I've also mentored a very large number of young and sometimes not so young founders. And what I've always been asked, look, how do I ensure A, my startup becomes successful, and B, how do I ensure that I get investments? So what we've tried to do is looking at all these startups that I've worked with, I tried to create a framework which you can use to judge yourself as a founder and your startup. And the investor typically will also use the same framework to judge you, right? And if you follow that, your chances of success, chances of getting investment are higher. If you don't follow that, obviously, chances get lower. There's no guarantee. Even God cannot guarantee success in investment, but at least the chances improve. So this framework is what I call the dream founder, what Anurag called the super founder. It's actually dream. And just to clarify, if this works, does it work? So that's the book, by the way. Where do I point it? So the best thing about technology is when you want it to work, it normally doesn't. No, that's okay. We live with that. So when I say dream founder, that's actually an acronym. And each letter of this word stands for something, and you can see what it stands for. D is dream big. R is build the right team. E is execution, very important. A is attitude. And I think Anurag spoke a lot about attitude, and most of those things are there in the book. And finally, make opportunities out of crisis. And all of you know what crisis we went through in the last couple of years, right? So what I'll do is I will share with you one story. And if I have time and Aditya allows me to, I'll share with you two stories. One story, which is actually a big success story that we at Lead Angels had invested in. And that story, the name of the founder is this. I'll tell you what the name of the startup is shortly. So, this guy, he's based in Bangalore. Yeah. This guy is an avid trekker. So he was trekking in rural Karnataka, and he landed up at some, rural kirana shop, and he found some very strange sweets, candies, not the barfi, jalebi variety, candies. Yeah, the what used to be typically Paris and Mortons and so on. And he tasted them, and they were very nice, right? Now these were completely Indian flavors. They were not typically, orange or strawberry or lemon or whatever. They were things like khatta aam, okay, or kathal. I mean, can you imagine a sweet made out of kathal? But it was good. Imli, right? Nibu, this kind of stuff. So he asked that guy, he says, look, where did you get these from? He says, no, there is a farmer nearby who manufactures them. So this guy went over to the farmer. That farmer had a little shed, chota sa shed, where this guy used to grow the fruit and then process it and sell it. Now, so this is what used to happen, and it was completely unorganized, tiny little farmer. So what Vinay realized was, he says, okay, if this is so tasty, and if this remote works, yeah, there's a big delay, I notice. So where is Aditya? Yeah. So since there is a big delay, I need about 1 hour more. Yeah. Anyway, you can't stop a professor. एक बार शुरू हो जाता है, he can't stop. Okay. So he says, look, it is so unique. Can I convert this into a huge branded opportunity because the entire country is open, right? And that's what I mean by, again, it doesn't agree with me. Sorry? No, this one. Oh, okay, okay. Boss, आप यहाँ आ जाओ. Okay. Good. Thank you. Yeah. So dream big. If you don't dream big, if you don't look at a market which is huge, at some stage your startup is going to stagnate, right? And nobody wants that. Okay, so that's one. Start by dreaming big. Next. This is the company he created. And by the way, I would assume that many of you have tried out their products, Desi Pops, Desi Meetha, Desi Chaat, Desi Imli, etc., etc. So next we come to execution. What he did was, and this is very, very important, he says, first I will set up one unit of my own in which I will manufacture these. And using that one unit, I will standardize all processes, right? Because if I have to do it at scale, you can't have different processes in each unit, right? So he standardized everything. Then what he said was, I have now standardized it, but I will not manufacture it. What I will do is I will now partner with other farmers who manufacture it, right? So these guys would set up their own units, and GoDesi's job was to control the quality, the processes, brand it, and ultimately distribute and market it, right? Now, look at the key thing here. This made it very highly scalable. And I need to spend a couple of minutes on scalability because a lot of founders, I think, keep asking me questions about this. Scalability is what? It's the ability to grow rapidly. And when I say grow, I'm not saying 15% in a year. I'm saying maybe 200%, maybe 300% in a year, right? Just to give you an example, take the example of a software company like Infosys. And since we are talking about startups, I'll take a small company, 500 programmers. Their revenue model is what? I will get a contract and I'll put programmers on the job, and therefore my revenues are proportional to the number of programmers I have. If I have to scale up, meaning let's say 200% in a year, that means 500 to 1500, that's the manpower I need. Now going from 500 to 1500 people in 1 year, very, very tough. Right? Almost impossible, I'd say. You'll have cultural issues, you'll get only freshers, people will leave, you'll have training problems, etc., etc. Not a scalable model. Great business, but not really scalable. Not the kind of business that can grow, 100%, 200%, 400% in a year, which is what startups need to do. But here, what this guy did was, he said, I need to make this business scalable. So if I am the manufacturer, it's not scalable. Because every time I need to grow 400%, I need to invest in land, capacity, unit, right? Not possible. So instead, I will identify partners, farmers who actually do the manufacturing. So if I have to grow 400%, all I do is identify more partners who set up their units and I scale, right? So scalability became a very, very major benefit of what he was doing. And that's where I talk about execution. Take another thing, the right team. And I think Anurag referred to this. See, what this guy did was he selected not every farmer who approached him, the like-minded farmers only. Why? Because remember, when you say team is employees, team is partners, team is distributors, team is dealers, team is everybody who interacts with you and is part of your business. It's important that your farmers also dream big. Because if they don't, you'll have a lot of tiny farmers all over the place. You won't be able to scale up, right? So firstly, he selected the right farmers. Secondly, he motivated them. How? This is the food processing industry. Typically what happens, the farmer grows the fruit, passes it on to the processing unit, and then it is processed, packaged, etc., distributed, sold, and ultimately goes to... If the consumer pays 100, farmer typically gets not more than 10 rupees out of it. Pathetic, right? Here, the farmer was doing not only the growing, but also the processing. And therefore, typically he got 30%. Okay. What does that do? Suddenly, the farmers were delighted and they've stuck to him. He's not just a single guy, right? So when I say right team, get the right people and nurture them, develop them so that they stay with you and they build your business. Okay. Next is attitude. And I think Anurag spoke about this several times, but I'll just mention one factor. There are many things in attitude, but one factor which I want to talk about. This guy, when he started, you have to deliver your product to Kirana shops. It's a consumer product. He borrowed his sister's second-hand two-wheeler and he would do it personally. Okay. He didn't say it's not my job. And why? Because by doing this, he understood the thinking of the Kirana shops. He knew how to sell. And tomorrow when he had a team of sales guys, he could train them. So, when I say attitude, one of the key things in attitude, there are many things, of course. One of the key things is I have to be willing to do everything. Of course, I can't do everything, but I have to be willing to. Don't say this is not my job, right? Okay, next. Last 2 years. Everybody knows what the hell the world went through, right? If you look at his competitors, farmers would grow fruit in one state and the processing might be done far away, possibly in a different state. And as you know, during COVID, interstate travel was a problem, right? But in this case, the farmer was the guy who was doing the processing. So suddenly he realized COVID was an opportunity to grab market share. So what did he do? He said, okay, I will chase the hell out of government officials to get permission, right? To open my units. And fortunately, in rural areas, COVID was less strong than in urban areas, at least at that time. Right? So that's one. Secondly, during COVID, a lot of people would, they would be consuming content on the internet, sitting at home, cursing the virus. He said, okay, I'll provide you content and it'll be content related to Desi. So he actually created a website which talked about healthy food, healthy living, yoga, etc. Built the brand. And by the way, because he built the brand, he had an entry barrier. Again, that's part of making opportunities out of crisis. And today, this guy, at least at the time I wrote the book, which is about 8 months back, it's the fastest selling confectionery brand on Amazon. Okay. So a real, genuine dream founder. His name is Vinay Kothari. You want to meet him? I mean, I can introduce him. He's based in Bangalore. What I will do now is, this is a success story. And if I have time, I will talk about a failure as well. Because I think it's important to learn from failures. Can you just load the other one, please? Sorry? No, there's another PPT. Chetan? बॉस मेरा टाइम जाता जा रहा, आदित्य मुझे मारेगा. हाँ, correct. Okay. In 10K and couldn't get money, and I'll explain why it failed, right? So some of you would be familiar with this concept, but I would assume some are not. So I'll explain what this is. So first of all, what is the problem with weddings? Now, when I ask this question to a married audience, normally everybody starts laughing. Nobody's laughing right now. I don't know why. But those are not the problems I'm trying to solve. I can't. Right? What is the problem with wedding gifts? Fundamental problem is, they're all useless. Right? So unwanted wedding gift, duplicate wedding gift, right? What happens to these duplicates and what happens to the unwanted useless ones? So somebody gives me a wedding gift, which I don't want. First, I'll curse the hell out of him. Gali dunga, right? And then I'll say, Aditya is getting married. Aditya, I'm going to pass it on to you. What will Aditya do? वो पहले मेरे को गाली देगा. What the hell, Dhruv? Yeah, I'm speeding up. Gently, he's giving me reminders. Yeah. So in the Western world, They have a very good solution for this, which is not very common in India. It's called a wedding gift registry. That's something very simple. It's basically an e-commerce site, right? And the concept is couple that is getting married goes to the e-commerce site and creates a wish list. So the e-commerce site will have all possible gift items, cutlery, crockery, tables, linen, etc., etc. And the couple selects out of that and says, okay, this is my wish list. This is what I want. So rather than the guest deciding, the couple decides what. And that page, that wish list has a link, a URL. In the e-cards that these that link is embedded. The guest clicks on that, reaches the page, decides what the couple and therefore buys it. Okay, and it's delivered later with fancy packaging and so on. So it's a very popular concept in the Western world, but obviously not very common in India. So these people came to us about 4 years back, right? Great team, wonderful team, husband and wife team, but some things went wrong, and I need to explain what went wrong. Number one, cultural issues. I'll just take you through a typical conversation between, let's say, a mother and either a son or a daughter who are married, right? And I'll say it in Hindi because that's typically the way the conversation would happen. Aditya, allowed Hindi? Mein? Okay. So the mother typically, when she's created this wedding gift registry, hi, tu kya kar rahi hai? Okay. Gift demand kar rahi hai? We'll be the laughing stock of our entire neighborhood, friend circle, family circle. How can you demand a gift? That's the issue. In the Western world, it's okay to say, look, I want this gift. In India, there's a cultural issue. And you must remember, it is very, very tough to change cultural biases. A lot of founders have come to us and said, no problem, sir, I'm going to advertise. Was something that has been going on for 1,000 years. How will your little bit of marketing change it in 1 year? You can't. So please remember, cultural biases are very difficult to change. How do you find this out? Talk to your customer. And I think one of the key issues that they missed out on was, and that's part of attitude, you have to be customer oriented. Find out what the customer wants, what he's willing to do or she's willing to do. Right? So that's one thing where they went wrong. Secondly, of course, don't blindly copy the West. Secondly, what went wrong? Guests would go to this registry site and decide, okay, I will take this particular, let's say, flask. And then you know what the guest would say? Hang on, I've decided on this flask. Let me try Amazon. Maybe it'll be cheaper there. And definitely it was cheaper there. Why? Because Amazon is a huge player and therefore they get huge discounts, and some of these discounts they pass on to the ultimate consumer. So therefore this site became a listing site. The registry, nobody bought stuff over there. They only discovered what the couple wanted, and the couple was not paying, so they made no revenue. So there was no revenue, right? So fundamental problem is wrong business model. Okay. For example, I don't know. For example, suppose they had said, we will create a wedding gift registry, but the fulfillment will be done by a partner, Amazon. They would have got much lower margins, but then they would not have been competing with Amazon, right? That may have worked, right? So the wrong business model. And third thing, what is to prevent Amazon, Flipkart, and now Jio from doing exactly the same thing? In fact, they have. At that time, they hadn't, but now they have, right? So the other thing is they did not have enough of an entry barrier, particularly for the giants in the business, right? And I think one message which I always leave with founders is don't try and compete with giants. Boss, you cannot compete with Mukesh Ambani, right? Just to summarize, did not get funding, closed down. Don't blindly copy the West, talk to your customer, don't compete with giants, right? So this is the dream founder, that the model that we have. And if you have time for questions, we can. Otherwise, maybe in the break. Yeah? Sure. Done. Okay, so that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry? And by the way, he's there in the book. He's one of the dream founder. That is? Okay.
See, we are all focused on the month, what is the MRR because you're raising the MRR because important. But how do you go beyond these things? How do you make sure that you're profitable on a, unit basis, you're valuable to your customers, and everything else is an outcome of that.
Is an outcome.
So, can you give some trades and some examples, some anecdotes
Okay.
that are in the book?
Okay. So, very, very valid question. And Anurag was never in my class, but tough question. One of the things a lot of founders, one of the mistakes a lot of founders make is they don't have a sufficient entry barrier. Okay. Which basically means they're doing exactly what the other guy is doing, or the other guy finds it very easy to copy them. And when you don't have an entry barrier, when there are many, many people, you have a price. Okay. That's number one. Therefore, do not get into a business first of all. So I'm saying at the getting in stage itself, do not get into a business where you are one of the 500s, right? What you have, what you're building has to be reasonably unique. Obviously, it can't be completely unique, reasonably unique with an entry barrier. So the guy is not able to copy you, which means you will have some level of pricing power, right? So that is one part. Because if you are doing exactly what the other guy is doing, frankly, if he gives a discount, you have no choice. You have to give a discount and then you're not profitable. You're not viable. So that's part number one. Part number two is a lot of founders do not focus on sustainability or profitability, exactly what Anurag has said. Unfortunately, the focus moves towards funding, right? The focus, you'll go to a party and you'll say, yeah, aaj maine, I've just closed 2 million. Billion is the wrong word. I've just closed a 2 million round of funding at such and such valuation. And everybody starts clapping and so on. That's not the focus. One of the things which I have learned from, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, by the way, he also figures in this book. He says the customer's money is far more important than the investor's money. Ultimately, you're running a business. Your job is not to get funding. Your job is to run your business. If in the process you need funding, take it. But funding higher and higher valuations every round is not the focus. So that is number two. Number three, I think what Anurag has mentioned very, very rightly is focus on your unit economics, right? And I would assume everybody here knows what that is. You're selling this service or this product. Your first focus should be, can I make a profit on just this one transaction alone? Forget about marketing costs, forget about overheads like salaries and rent and so on. Whatever I'm spending on developing and selling this product and whatever I'm earning from the product, is that profitable? If you focus on that and you grow and your unit economics is positive, then the more you grow, the more you get closer to overall profitability because then your overheads are taken care of. So I would say three things, many more, but three things which immediately come to mind. Number one, make sure you have an entry barrier so that you have some level of pricing power. That's the only way you can make sure that your unit economics is good. Two is focus on unit economics, which also means solid cost control. And three is the second thing which I said, which is do not focus on funding, focus on your business. I've seen people, in fact, I wrote a piece in the Economic Times 2-3 weeks ago, the mythical unicorn, or how mythical are today's unicorns. We have 103 unicorns, right? We crossed 103 last year. How many of them are profitable? No. But there are some, Naukri, InfoEdge, IndiaMart, Zoho, probably Zerodha, right? And now Nykaa. So there are some who have focused on the business rather than, boss, let's get more and more funding at higher valuation so we can brag about it. I think essentially focus on the business rather than on the funding, and hopefully it works.